They say that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, but people tend to forget the second part of that phrase, that mediocrity can pay to greatness. Well, let's see what these films have to offer in terms of their flattery. I'm Sean Ferrick for What Culture, and here are 10 recent movies that were huge rip-offs. Number 10, Retribution. Liam Neeson's most recent action thriller romp Retribution, itself a remake of a Spanish-French film of the same name, stars him as a man who ends up trapped in his car after he learns that his seat has been rigged with a bomb which will explode if he attempts to exit the vehicle. Gee, this sounds a little bit familiar, doesn't it? Yes, it's basically a low-budget riff on the action classic Speed, replacing a bus and dozens of extras with a Mercedes SUV and Liam Neeson and his 2 children, who are left perilously hanging out in the back seats. Sure, there's the subtle but important difference that Neeson's car isn't primed to blow if the speed drops below 50 miles an hour, but the basic beats of the story, of a man being held hostage inside a vehicle by a terrorist bomber, are fundamentally the same, with a dash of Joel Schumacher's terrifically confined thriller phone booth thrown in for good measure. As rip-offs go, it's not terrible conceptually. Narratively never manages to get out of first gear. Seriously, just go watch Speed again instead. Number 9, Heart of Stone. Netflix's spy actioner Heart of Stone has been soundly derided as Mission Impossible at Home, and it's tough to argue with that assessment. The Gal Gadot-led yarn is an ensemble globe-trotting espionage flick in which an intelligence operative races to prevent an AI-powered quantum computer from falling into the wrong hands. Beyond Heart of Stone taking its cues from the Mission Impossible franchise's basic structure in a very broad sense, this is actually shockingly similar to the overarching narrative of the series' most recent entry, Dead Reckoning, which sees Ethan Hunt and co. trying to corral a dangerous AI. The big difference: Heart of Stone doesn't have the witty writing, electric cast chemistry, creative action, or technical meticulousness of the more recent Mission Impossibles, and so it can't help but feel like a not-so-cheap, but certainly deathly pale imitation. Though Netflix dumped $150 million into this thing with the clear hope of spinning it into a franchise, given how it came and went in the span of about a week, it's safe to say that Heart of Stone hasn't got the cultural cachet necessary to become even a competent Me Too Mission Impossible cosplay. Number 8, Ghosted, The Family Plan, Roleplay. In addition to Amazon producing a new TV series based on 2005's hit spy rom-com Mr. and Mrs. Smith, the past few months have been positively littered with similarly espionage-themed meet-cutes. First up, there's Apple's wretched Ghosted, where a man learns that his new love interest is secretly a spy. Then came The Family Plan, in which Mark Wahlberg plays a former assassin turned family man whose past comes back to bite him. And finally, we have Amazon's Roleplay, where Kaylee Cuoco stars as the wife and mother who also happens to moonlight as an assassin for hire. All 3 films were summarily panned by critics, and it's little surprise given they were all just different flavors of a ripoff, taking Mr. and Mrs. Smith, True Lies formula, a love interest family member is actually a spy assassin, and listlessly dumping the end result onto a streaming service. To the surprise of no one, they each evaporated from the cultural consciousness within a mere days of release. Number 7, Pain Hustlers. Netflix's Pain Hustlers is a wholly transparent attempt to give the opioid epidemic the Wolf of Wall Street, The Big Short treatment. That is, chronicle the debacle in slick, irreverent, and informative manner, ensuring that a wider audience becomes educated on a subject that they might otherwise ignore. Yet, Harry Potter director David Yates is so different from Martin Scorsese or Adam McKay, and his attempts to spin the fascinating focal story into a mile-a-minute examination of excess and greed end up feeling like a filmmaker trying too hard to ape the aforementioned films. One critic even tellingly dubbed it The Wolf of Walgreens. The flashy editing, faux witty dialogue, and self-conscious performances make Pain Hustlers feel more like a Saturday Night Live parody of a prestige dramedy, rather than an earnest attempt at one. Emily Blunt certainly tries her damnedest here, but this is painfully beige fare that feels wildly inferior to its obvious inspirations. Number 6, The Beekeeper. Now for a movie which proves that blatant rip-offs don't actually have to be bad. We have the surprisingly decent new Jason Statham revenge thriller, The Beekeeper. Despite the dubious early January release date and ever-inconsistent David Ayer directing, this is basically the best-case scenario for a Stath-starring low-rent John Wick knockoff. Where to begin? Much like John Wick, The Beekeeper's protagonist, Adam Clay, is a retired assassin who decides to come out of retirement when a tragedy befalls him. Rather than his adorable dog being killed, though, it's his dear friend Eloise, who falls for a phishing scam, loses all of her money, and promptly dies by suicide. Oh, and the bad guys kill Clay's beloved bees too. This sends Clay on a roaring rampage of revenge as he tracks down the tech bro douche responsible, Derek Danforth, not dissimilar to John Wick's thoroughly detestable villain Yosef Tarasov, and sets about dismantling his entire entire criminal enterprise. Throw in a few neon-lit fight scenes, a parental figure who can't abide Derek's idiocy, and an intriguing yet vaguely defined criminal underworld involving the aforementioned Beekeepers, and there's no disguising where this movie takes its cues from. And yet the end result is genuinely fun, pacey action flick that doesn't dare take itself too seriously, even if it stands in the long shadow cast by its forebear. Number 5. Secret Headquarters. Quietly dumped on Paramount Plus in the summer of 2022, Secret Headquarters made no attempt at all to disguise the fact that it was basically, what if Spy Kids, but superheroes? Stop us if you've heard this one before. The plot revolves around a kid who begins to suspect, quite correctly, that his father is a superhero after discovering his secret headquarters in the family basement. Said child's suspicions, of course, turn out to be correct. And because riffing on Spy Kids isn't enough, Wilson's superhero, the Guard, is also very clearly modelled on Iron Man, if you ordered your Iron Man from Wish, that is. It adds up to one of the most forgettable big-budget family movies released over the last few years, which one can't even profess to boast the personality of the Spy Kids franchise's increasingly dire run of sequels. At least it doesn't plumb the tawdry depths of Netflix's recent Spy Kids Armageddon reboot, so I mean, that's something. Number 4. All the Asylum movies. It would be remiss to write about movie rip-offs without discussing The Asylum, the infamous schlock factory which has been producing mockbuster versions of hit movies for the last 2 decades, all in an attempt to trick your well-meaning grandparents into accidentally buying them amid the belief they're getting a legit Hollywood experience. Some of the studio's more attention-grabbing past rip-offs include the Snakes on a Train, Transmorphers, and Atlantic Rim. And though The Asylum's profile has declined considerably in recent years, they're still plugging away at producing their bafflingly profitable low-budget knockoffs. 2023 alone has seen them release rip-offs Meth Gator, Transmorphers, Mech Beasts, End Times, Megalodon, The Frenzy, and The Exorcists. And while there's a strong chance you haven't seen any of these movies, The Asylum's shrewd business model, that is, making these rip-offs for an absolute pittance, ensures they've never lost money on one of them. On one hand, it's about the most cynical way imaginable to make a movie, but on the other, it's kinda hard not to grudgingly respect the hustle and business acumen, at least a little bit. Number 3. Lift. Netflix's Lift is a pretty shameless rip-off of the well-trod Ocean's 11 formula, as a group of circling the drain crooks plot to carry out one more heist, their most insanely ambitious yet. Even shifting the action from a casino to a mid-flight plane can't add much spice to this mostly flavourless stew, which, like the Ocean's movies, takes a diverse cast of talented, likeable actors, but unlike Ocean's, gives them almost nothing interesting to work with. The chemistry of the cast is vital in a film like this, yet in large part due to the aggressively generic script, it does nothing to tease out their charm through quippy interactions. Sure, Ocean's 11 was an easygoing crime caper, but one elevated by its smart filmmaking and charisma-laden cast, whereas Lift's more high-concept, CGI-soaked iteration is such a laid-back excursion you can comfortably watch it while doing your laundry and not miss a beat. Number 2. Rebel Moon. Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon is a film so shamelessly unoriginal you couldn't be blamed for believing that it was penned by AI. But no, it was co-written by Snyder himself, who originally pitched the idea to Lucasfilm for a possible Star Wars spin-off, but after they turned him down, he repackaged it as an original, and we're using that term very loosely, film for Netflix. Yet, there is not an original bone in the film's body, as it cross-pollinates the hero's journey space opera beats of Star Wars A New Hope with 7 samurais men in a mission setup, and even throws in a creature-taming scene clearly lifted from both the Bookbeak sequence of the Harry Potter films and the Ikran taming scene in Avatar. It is a film that simply offers up shallow ersatz shadows of vastly superior movies without doing even a single thing to distinguish itself as a truly unique IP. And honestly, as little excitement as there is for the upcoming Rebel Moon sequel, there's at least some morbid curiosity to see which additional movies Snyder cribs from this time. Number 1. Scream 6. Bit of a controversial choice to end this list then, because Scream 6 asks fans to consider where the line between homage and rip-off lies, and unlike every other film mentioned here, it overzealously borrows from a prior entry in the franchise. If 2022's 5th Scream film was basically a soft reboot which held a mirror up to the original 1996 slasher film, it at least had enough new ideas of its own not to feel like a pure retread. Scream 6, however, tests the audience's capacity for familiarity, given how egregiously it goes the disappointingly lazy path of just lifting elements wholesale from Scream 2. Like the original Scream sequel, Scream 6 shifts the setting away from Woodsboro to college. Gail gets punched in the face, Sam's boyfriend is suspected of being Ghostface but ultimately innocent, the third act takes place in a theatre, one of the killers is a parent of a prior Ghostface, and the killer's motive is good old-fashioned revenge. It's just leaning too heavily on what came before, and while it's clearly not trying to disguise that fact, it does come off as rather unimaginative, if not outright lazy, after successfully bringing the series back to prominence with the previous film. Needless to say, if Scream 7 does ever actually happen, gonna need to try harder than just rehashing the broad plot beats of Scream 3, and that's saying nothing about what's gone on with the casting and directing.